Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Stover, licensed marriage and family therapist, and you're listening to the Modern Day Romantic Podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I am so excited to introduce you to Mark and Janice, a couple that I've interviewed for today's episode who identifies as being soulmates, but beyond that, they each have had extraordinary paranormal experiences throughout their lives and throughout their relationship with one another. I think there's so many fascinating stories they share in this interview with me, and whether or not you believe in paranormal experiences, it still might be interesting to open your mind, be curious. And for those that do believe in paranormal experiences or open or interested, I think there are many, many treats that Mark and Janice have in store for you. Before we dive into the actual episode, if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, and even sharing this episode with someone if you like the material and what we talk about in this episode. All of these things really help the podcast to grow, and I would greatly appreciate any support that you might be able to contribute. All right, without further ado, here's Mark and Janice. Well, welcome to the podcast, Mark and Janice. You know, I first heard about the two of you and your story on another podcast, and it really piqued my curiosity. And I was like, I have to have you on this podcast and talk about some of these fascinating experiences you two have had. So would you mind just kind of starting there with some of these really interesting, consciousness challenging experiences you two have had with one another?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we met through, well, as you mentioned, the other podcast. Jim Harold's Campfire had a Facebook group, and that's where we sort of initially met. Mark was on the Campfire early on. Mark had just written the book, Wyatt's Weird World, and he was on it. I think it was the Campfire, talking about his book and his experiences. And then I was really intrigued because I've always had a thing about England, which is another, rabbit hole we can go down, but we're not going to right now, staying focused. Anyway, we are on this mutual Campfire Facebook group. We started chatting. I bought the book, and then there were some things in the book that literally I had to put the book down and kind of step away because it hit me at a level that was just really deep, and just resonated, but in kind of a way that made me kind of face things that I didn't really want to face. I wasn't comfortable with. So I had to step away from the book and come back to it later. And once I, read the book, and then I saw Mark on the Facebook group, and we started chatting, through messaging. And then we would email sometimes back and forth because I eventually asked him about this particular chapter, and that started conversations, and we started emailing back and forth.
I think you said at the time, just to sort of hone in on what you said, it was the way I described the experience that's what hit home, because we've been around this stuff all our lives, and we hear people on podcasts, paranormal podcasts and stuff, and they discuss this stuff, and every now and again you'll get that matching of that's what happened to me, but it's very precise, and the way I described it was what Janice picked up on, because she thought, that must have happened, because there are things in that description which I don't normally hear people, not to say the other people are, telling stories, but it was deep. It was something which only somebody who'd experienced that would know, and something that hadn't been out in the public domain, maybe.
Right. So, and I'd never heard this particular thing, this experience detailed, and it just hit home to me on a very deep level. So that was my initial thing, to maybe think that if there were other like really weird coincidences that we found out later, but this was the first one, and this was the one that maybe linked us in a way on a deeper level. And so it kind of got my attention. And our relationship has always been one of sort of bantering. So if we...
don't think we're having a row. We just...
Right, yeah.
My son was here with us recently, and because he's not used to us. He's never been around us.
He is from England,
And
so
yeah,
it's his first visit with us together.
Yeah, and I assume he felt that we were arguing sometimes, but we weren't really arguing. We just we like to sort of playfully insult each other and each other's countries, and
it's
about the things that you do and the things that we do. I'll have a little dig at her about the way you spell things or whatever it is, and it's just. I think he felt it was like we're having this stupid argument, but no, it's just
what we do.
We enjoy it, you know.
So
and I wasn't like that in my previous relationship at all. But
so
it's just our personalities, sort of part of that.
Sometimes
connection is that's part of it. It's not, it's not that we've fallen out.
Right. Well, you talked about soulmates, and initially, through our conversations, emails, and we didn't really ever talk because international calls are really expensive. So I think through emails and texting, we kind of got to know each other on a deeper level before we ever met. And so maybe oversharing was a thing, but we had this lifetime of people not believing us when we had, because I've always had strange things happen, and Mark probably more so. And I was a little bit jealous.
And it's ongoing as well.
Right, yeah.
I think we together we're like, it sort of attracts.
It maybe magnifies
I don't know.
The strangeness, because since we've been together, we've had many more things.
It's like we hear people on paranormal podcasts and they go on to talk about their experiences, and they might have 1, 2, maybe 3. But there's people like us who just like, we're just like,
every day, okay.
It's quite a normal thing.
And then you kind of
just
don't
little things, insignificant things that we should take note of them, but we often forget.
Yeah. But we could go way down the paranormal things that have happened to us separately, but
so many.
And together, and probably more together, or they seem to be a little bit magnified, like our energy together sort of not brings things in, but maybe like the universe notices when our combined energies or auras or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, but I know you had mentioned before in your notes about what you say, twin souls,
twin flames.
Yep. And I've read a little bit about that. And initially I thought that, but I was sort of in denial because what I read about was it's not always an easy relationship. And there are so many challenges and things you have to face about yourself that you might not be ready to face. And initially it was kind of there, but I didn't want to look at it because I didn't want to do those challenges. It's like, I just need some calmness. I just want to have a calm, loving relationship. And if it's twin flames, twin souls, that brings all this karmatic things that you maybe have to face that you don't necessarily want to face. And it might not have a happy ending. And I love happy endings. But anyway, so I do believe that, to answer your question. And there have been challenges. We've both been through things together and had to face our inner demons and inner, children, and fear of rejection and abandonment. All of those things came out for me in this relationship. And it's been very, I do believe we've both grown. I know I have through the relationship. And I think our bonds are very, very deep, soul deep. And I think the challenges have made us stronger together and separately. I feel like I'm a better person through knowing Mark. Definitely an enriched person, not just with his culture, but with his insights. He's very perceptive and notices things I don't, like sometimes obvious things. But, and I've been talking too much. So.
No, fine.
No, you're fine.
Someone else.
Well, so just to clarify, just from the very beginning of the relationship, you were reading Mark's book and you were almost having like a soul stirring or a deep resonance and feeling very validated on the inside because you had similar experiences to what he was writing about, but you had maybe even questioned the validity of those experiences in yourself, or at least just didn't want to share that? Like you hadn't
Right.
really, you didn't know other people had similar experience, the same type of experience?
It's not so much that, but it was like almost something that I had forgotten. Like if you have a dream,
Okay.
and I know right afterward, if you write down that dream, if you don't, you forget about it. It was almost like that.
Right.
Like someone had written down a dream that I had had, but I thought was a dream that possibly, likely wasn't a dream. And reading
Mm-hmm.
Mark's experience just brought it all home. It's like, oh
Mm.
my gosh, I remember that exact
Mm.
feeling. I know that feeling. And it wasn't a
Okay.
comfortable feeling. It was deeply upsetting. So,
In general, I think the potential and power of love and relationships is to bring us to a wholer, fuller version of
mhm.
ourselves. So even that initial experience awakened something that maybe had been dormant or sleeping inside of you. And then the question is, what do we do with all of this
Mhm.
material that's online now? And what do I do with me as a result of kind of what stirs, in the cauldron when we come into relationship or even encounters with another
Right.
person that
Mm.
there's that deep resonance
Right.
with, or just something really supernatural
Mhm.
or kind of uh, hard to understand or
Mm.
even describe occurs between the two
Yeah.
people.
Well,
Yeah.
it's it's how to sort of go. We're the way I see it is we're all part of this. Everything is about frequency, I believe. So there's it's like a TV or radio. We're all different, and I think we're all. I can't even put it into words, but it's like we're all part of each other anyway. Um, and time isn't as we imagine it to be, I don't think either. Um, you can be out of time. I'm gabbling, but it's like I just feel that we're all connected anyway, and I think there's a strong possibility that we have been connected before this life. I think, and I'm very sort of open to all these things, but I'm not sold on any of them. I'm just curious all
Hmm.
the time, and I'm fascinated by this stuff, and I think there's more and more of it coming out now as we move through the years. It's like we can talk about this stuff a lot more now than I could when I was younger. There was like a tiny percentage of people that would sort of listen
Mhm.
to you'd talk to each other about strange experiences, and all your other mates would be laughing at you.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's more
Accepted?
accepted. I
Yeah.
think generally, I think the percentage of people who are actually open to this stuff probably used to be sort of 10%, maybe now it's like 35, 40. I don't know.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But we're
Yes.
gradually
Yeah.
moving forward, and there will always be people who doubt, who don't have the experiences and have to explain everything by a current level of science,
Right.
which is ridiculous
Right.
because it's like if you go back 500, 600 years, I mean, are we supposed to still trust their
right.
understandings of
Hmm.
things? But in some ways,
But
they were ahead of us.
yeah.
So, yeah, go on, after you.
So, well, just moving on from that initial reading of the book, initial emails and things, the next kind of significant thing that happened for me was, um, well, I was kind of not stalking. Mark's was stalking, wasn't stalking on Facebook. So I was like checking his, because he did a lot of posts and things. And it
Back
was
in the
like
day, I did, yeah. I
in
remember.
England, I was always been sort of fascinated and obsessed with England. And it turns out there might be a reason for that.
Yeah.
But I was always like, oh, what's he doing today? Because my life was pretty boring. I worked at a state, a government job, and my kids were all grown and gone. And
Yeah.
it was like the highlight of my day to see, oh, what's he been up to today?
Tell
So
tell Andrea the story about the when I actually went to do a talk, the first
right,
ever
that's
talk
what I
I
was getting
did.
to that. Sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry,
No, no,
carry
no,
on.
no. You go. You go.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. So I never have done this before in my life, but I had this really vivid dream where I was with him and I'd never physically been with him. I don't
We've
think
never
at the
met. We've
time,
never
never
met.
met, never
No,
even spoken on the phone.
no.
So I had no idea, except for the brief podcast, what his voice sounded like or what like the essence of a person, like what their energy feels like. No idea. So anyway, I was at this, it seemed to me like a party, a reception. I couldn't really tell, but I was standing alongside Mark, and he was like greeting people and talking in general. And then there were a couple other just like scenes or flashes. And it was a long continuous thing, but there's, parts that kind of were like stills in a video that kind of stuck in my mind. And so a couple of those are really specific, and I could see the layout of the rooms where he was, that he was in with the tables and the other people there. And it was really, really vivid. And in the morning, it was one of those dreams you have right before you wake up. So I remember the feeling of being like pulled back in my body, kind of like a silly putty type of stretching. And I was resisting it. It's like, no, this is really fun. I'm hanging out with my really good friend. I want to stay with these people who are, I knew it was probably something about the paranormal, which has always been an obsession. So it's like, no, I just want to stay. And I was really resisting. And I popped back in my body. So again, it was one of those things where I kind of wrote down the highlights real quick. I even drew out a little sketch of the room
We've still got it somewhere.
that I had seen him in. So anyway, I didn't hear anything from Mark for a few days. And then really weirdly, he popped back online to tell about his experience over the weekend where he'd been at this conference.
No, it was wow. So when I published the first book, Wyatt's Weird World, I don't know how it happened now, but like on Jim Harold's show, I think I was on that, and one or two others, and a guy in England, really nice guy called if you ever get a chance to speak to him, his name's Neil Geddes Ward, fantastic guy and great speaker. And he got hold of me and he basically said, we have this get together, like a meetup. I'm trying to think where it is. It's sort of north of London, a place I've never been to before. High Wycombe. That's it, High Wycombe. And basically he said, we'd like you to come and give a talk about your book. And I sort of broke it down into I was raised, I'll keep this really brief. I was raised on an old gunpowder works, which was like 400 plus years old. It wasn't a gunpowder works when I lived there in 1960, but I was only there as a baby. And it was like we lived in the sort of remains of the buildings that had been sort of made into domestic dwellings at the time. And there was a community of maybe 20 families around this place. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful place, but sort of very rustic. And I don't think they even had electric, probably. I don't know. I can't remember. I was very young. But while I was there, and I didn't know about this till later, but it was one of the things that sort of got me interested in all the weird stuff. My father had an experience, which I won't go into now, but he saw something really, really scary, actually. And it turned out to be on the anniversary of an explosion where about five people were blown to bits, basically. And so I'd researched all that because it's always fascinated me, and found out a lot of extra stuff over the years from other sources, other local sources. And I presented a talk on that gunpowder works. I'd probably do a better job now, but I did that in front of this. They hired a room in a pub, and there was, I think, about 30 or 40 people there, and it was quite, first time I'd ever done it. I was quite nervous, really. And then after that, we went back to this Menna and Matt. Yeah, Menna and Matt, and again, a lovely couple of people, like really highly intelligent and very nice people. And they said, you can, because it was quite a distance from where I lived at the time. So they said, you can stop over, and there's a few other people coming round. And they were all into this stuff. And there were people I'd sort of heard about on the circuit. And it was fantastic. I met all these great people. And it was why they had just built this, like a summer house, log cabin type place, quite a big one in the back garden. And it's a very heavily wooded place. So they built this, and it was brand new. It was about a week or so. He built it. Matt had built it, And he'd laid it out, or Menno had laid it out, with all these tables and everything, with all the drinks and the snacks. And some of these people were giving further talks about their experiences. I wish I could remember the names of the people. But anyway, they were doing all this, and I was just sat there, sort of relaxing, because I'd done my bit as I saw it. I was just like, entertain me. I love listening to this stuff anyway. And while I was there, there was a lady. I can't remember her name now, but I think she probably had a little bit too much to drink, and she was sort of sitting on my side. You didn't actually mention this bit, but she was sitting on my side, and she just kept leaning into me, like really close, and really just talking into me, like. And it was really uncomfortable, and I kept trying to sort of edge away.
And that's one of the snapshots that I got was of a woman leaning over Mark, and he was kind of not really. He seemed a little like not intimidated, but not like he didn't want to be there, because she seemed a little aggressive.
And she ended up actually having a verbal fight with another lady there, which sort of got patched up, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about that. We always do this."
So
it didn't end in tears or blood or anything, but it was just like I felt really uncomfortable with her.
And that was the impression that I saw and that was one that stood out.
And I didn't say any. I didn't tell her I'm going to give a lecture. No. I'm going to go to this party afterwards or whatever. Nothing,
there was no. I mean, we weren't that. Updates on each other's lives at that point. But one of the shots that I got. Another one was kind of standing by the door of the house and looking outside to see like the front of the garden where their house was. And then we did visit 2 years later, maybe, because I went to see Mark in England, and he took me to the actual place, Matt and Minna's. And just looking at that view, it just struck me that, yes, that was totally confirming of what I saw. It's like, that's what I saw exactly.
Well, again, we're coming back to this astral thing, but, we're definitely, I mean, I'm 100% convinced. I don't care what anyone else thinks. We are driving this body. We're having an experience in a body. And I think we probably go on and have thousands of others, and maybe more than one at a time. Who knows? Who knows how the brain works.
But I had never.
But I think that's what she was hopping astrally.
But I've never done that.
Like that too. So.
But it was just that I felt so drawn to him that my soul or whatever would leave my body to be with him, because it was probably, highly charged emotional. You were a little nervous. You were excited about meeting these people. And it was probably a highly charged emotional situation for him. And I always try to be supportive. So I don't know if my astral self thought, I just, he might need me to be there to support him. I did that, or it was just sort of, it definitely wasn't anything I tried to do. It was absolutely spontaneous, no intention. It just really floored me that happened. And I was that drawn to him even then. So.
Do you remember consciously any meaning you put on that? Like, this is where I think it's really interesting in relationships, because people have these experiences and can say, "Oh, this means this," and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Always kind of pan out in this like really romanticized, connective way.
Right. It just sort of brought home to me, I think. Not meaning, but just how connected that we might be. And I kind of, from that point, kind of wanted to explore that more.
Right.
And I did, because I was so intrigued by it. I just had to email Mark and say, this is what I had, and this is what I saw. Yeah. And I remember the email, it was just like silent for a while. I'm like, oh God, I've said too much. I freaked him out. I'm just going to stop. And you didn't say anything because you were confirming with Mana, like the layout of the room and some of the details that I shared. I think you even
I think I did speak to her actually at the time. And
my email with my little drawing.
Yeah. The other thing that we should stress for anyone who will listen is we were on separate sides of the Atlantic.
Right.
So this whole idea of distance, it takes us like 8 hours to fly normally from Chicago to London.
Oh, at least 8.
Yeah,
that's a quick flight.
That's the minimum.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But you can be there in an instant. I believe that, and I think when we pass, that's what we probably do. I don't know how that works, but I think we can. The power of the mind is incredible. That's another rabbit hole I could go down, but I feel that I haven't, the few gifts I've got. One of them, and I don't know why. I think some people are just born with certain things. Is that I can use that, and I don't use it enough. I really don't use it enough because it actually scares it. It scared me. I did this when I was younger. If you can use you can concentrate. I mean, it sort of comes into the idea of prayer as well. I mean, I'm not religious, but it's the same thing in a way. But you're putting thoughts out, and you're putting strength behind that if you do it properly. It's like meditation. It's all tied in together. And I think, as from what Janice was saying, we are connected, sort of astrally, for want of a better word, spiritually, soulfully, whatever. Yeah, sorry, my mind's gone off on a tangent now.
It's okay. Well, I mean, you're talking about like having these experiences in our culture in today's times too, and even growing up, and that if not a lot of people talk about this, and it's kind of closeted or taboo to say these types of things. It once was even more so than today, and then you, the experiencer, don't really have a safe place to go and even read, learn about, talk about what's just happened to me.
A little bit more nowadays. I mean, there's a whole community of people where we can talk about any of this stuff and no one rolls their eyes because they've either experienced it themselves or they're fascinated and they want to hear. So we have got that, safe space,
Well, we're kind of like each other's safe space too, because I always, I mean, when Mark says, "Oh, I just heard something," I'm like, "Oh, what did they say?" Not, "Oh, no, you didn't," or, "Oh, you were just hearing, the wind." I absolutely believe him. We were both of us, a bit skeptical, but if Mark believes that he's seen, heard, felt something, I absolutely always trust that he's telling me the truth, and that's, it's likely because this spirit world seems to like.
I'll give you an example of where I was heading with that other one, but I sidetracked myself. But when I was, I think about 14 or 15, I was fascinated by the whole. Well, I sort of am still, I suppose, the UFO aspects of things. I don't think, just to go. I don't believe they're sort of mechanical craft and they're coming from some other planet. I think they're sort of other dimensional entities that are probably already around us anyway. But anyway, I was fascinated by all that, and I was reading Colin Wilson. You heard of Colin Wilson? Colin Wilson was a very, very big name in I think the 50s. He began, and he wrote a novel. I'm trying to think what it is. He was one of his sort of the angry young men, as they called him at the time. The Arnold Weskers and Colin Wilson, all these sort of people. And he was like one of the most famous writers in Britain at the time, the 50s and 60s. And at some point in his career, he got fascinated by all this, mysteries and the occult and all this sort of stuff. And he wrote these fantastic books. One of them was called The Occult. Another one was Mysteries and so on. They're huge books. And in one of those books, he was talking about this. He was talking about the power of thoughts and all this. I'm trying to remember what it was. But anyway, he was basically saying you can call these, and I do know this actually happens because I had a friend who could actually do this. But you could call them in. So you could sort of go out on on a moonlit night and stand on a hill or whatever it is, somewhere quiet, and you can use the power of your brain, and you can actually ask them if there's anything there, to show you a sign. It sounds crazy, but
Mm.
I was fascinated by all this, and I found a quiet moment when I was sort of 14, 15 or whatever, just laying in bed, and I was thinking about this stuff, and I was consciously trying to do that. And nothing happened at the time. And as you sort of forget about it. And then at some point later, not that much later, few nights, whatever it was, I was in my home and I was walking along the landing to go around the corner into my bedroom. And I actually had a hand come down. I didn't see it, but I felt a hand come down on my shoulder. And it's because I wasn't ready for it. It's all very well reading about this stuff and talking about this stuff, but when you're not ready for it and it happens, it freaks you out, which is what it did to me. I mean, at the time, and it actually put me off dabbling in this stuff at all for a long time. I just put all my books, all my UFO stuff, my ghost stuff, everything to one side for a few years, and I just got into music. Cars and girls
and football.
And football, yeah. So, and I didn't come back to it for a few years, really. So I basically wasn't ready for that. But in later years, I've sort of explored that area a bit more. I've done that healing thing with your. When she's had aches and pains, sometimes I can literally, and I don't know how I do it, but I can put my hand on, say she had a bad knee, and I can put my hand on the knee, and just by using, people are going to be freaking out, this guy's crazy, but I know it happens. I know I can do it, and I can create heat with my hand just by picturing flames and whatever, and I can create that heat, and Janice feels that heat to the point where I have to take my hand off because it's burning.
Yeah, he's a natural healer and very connected.
But I won't go down that route because I'm aware of it, but I'm very reluctant to go down that route, and I just won't do it because I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually quite skeptical. So when I hear some other people talking about stuff, I'm like, yeah, right. Even though I do it, and I know that, but I do it.
There are people who take advantage, and I think that's what Mark is good at. He's got a good
advantage.
You just got a good we call it BS meter.
Right.
So and he's going to be that person. Well, anyway, back to
Well, no, I was going to say I chose my PhD program at the University of West Georgia in part because we could study transpersonal psychology, and there was a parapsychologist on staff there, or faculty. So I thought, this is going to be wonderful to talk about these types of experiences. And there was a class called Ghosts even. So I sign up, I take the class, and I was just shocked because out of all the classes, this was the most skeptical of all. So it's almost as a parapsychologist, you have to really come up with all the other reasons that something could happen. And it's like trying to disprove it almost is the route that it takes. And I can understand, trying to stand among the scientific community and calling yourself a parapsychologist, that this is already a vulnerable thing. But truly, out of all the classes that I took, I felt like, okay, we're trying to explain it because of this or that or something. And so I presented a paper and said, okay, there's all that. And also, what if it's real? Like, what if that's real too? So there's just this feeling, and it accompanies, parapsychology and the paranormal experiences, that the skepticism, and probably that's healthy to some extent, that you don't fully go into everything, you keep one foot on the ground with this, but at the same time, wow, they're really profound experiences that people have.
It's the very nature of this, of what this weird stuff. The very nature of it is that science likes to measure and weigh things and have repeatable results,
And that's
but you
really
can't do
hard
that.
to
It's
do
like they're
in a
not
lab.
compatible.
Yeah.
So
and
you're always
that's-
going to have that. Well, it couldn't have happened because it's like
we can't make it happen
doesn't
again.
work like that.
It's not. Yes.
So
It's hard
yeah,
to
yeah.
have something scientifically based
Yeah,
that's so
yeah.
unpredictable. Like Mark
Yeah.
said, it's like it's always happened when you least expect it.
Yeah, and you
Like
you
when you
can't
go looking
you can't
for
record it because you don't
Yeah.
know it's coming.
right. It's almost
That's
impossible.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had experiences too where it's almost like they defy you or they kind of play with you. Remember the interview you did with Jeff? And
Yeah,
Mark had this really brilliant, he has a podcast too.
I used to have
Well,
about
Cuckoo
6 months,
Town, Cuckoo Town podcast.
but
But you haven't. Yeah, we've been moving and sort of, yeah, we're settled, but it
busy.
was a really, really busy 6 months,
Yeah.
the past 6 months. So you were recording this really brilliant interview with
I wasn't brilliant.
Professor
The guy I was interviewing
Professor
was brilliant,
Payne,
but
but in their house, and they he is a really, really interesting person, and he's very open to paranormal experiences and just all of the other side. And during the interview, they have things happen at their house. So during the interview, you noticed when you were editing
yeah,
that there were some noises, some
Weird
things
noises.
that weren't there at the time.
Yeah.
Nobody noticed. They were the only two in the house.
Yeah.
And then you had it all brilliantly done. And
I was actually really upset because I'd
yeah,
taken so much time
and
to
it was
make
so
it,
good.
and I was so happy with it, and I just finished it, and somehow it just completely went
Crashed.
from my. I lost it.
Wow.
I could not find it. I went back through. I spent, and I felt really bad for Jeff because he's actually not in the best of health now.
And it was stressful for
And,
him
yeah,
to do it.
yeah.
And it was
And
so
I
good.
didn't want to ask him to do it again because you can't quite capture something if you try and get it again.
Well, you certainly couldn't have gotten the weird,
All the little insights he
noises
had.
and- yeah.
He was just
But it
unbelievable.
was like a brilliant piece,
Yeah.
like, once and forever kind of recording, and just totally crashed. And there was no like way to recover it. You tried and tried
Wow.
and tried.
But
It's the
yeah.
closest I've ever seen Mark to tears, really. He was so upset. But it's just kind of like an example of sometimes they just don't want to be recorded.
Yeah.
You lose footage, you lose video, you
Okay.
lose batteries when you're
So
doing investigations.
we should make
and things.
it sort of clear though for anyone who listens that we're not really talking about ghosts. Really, we're talking about
right,
elemental
like,
spirits of some sort,
or the fairy,
the fae,
the fae,
whatever you want to call them. Who I believe they are not necessarily everywhere, but they are around some people. They are around some locations. Obviously, we can't see them because they're on a different frequency. Yep. Maybe they can pop into ours occasionally when it suits them. Jeff himself, he's a professor, retired professor. He fully is on board with this. He's seen things himself. His wife has seen. They live right out in the countryside here, and he told me a story the other day how somebody, I won't go into detail, but there was somebody who was connected who had to visit them. Do you remember? Were you around? I don't know.
No.
But anyway, he was saying that this person was clearly not popular with their sort of house spirits or whatever they are.
Oh, right.
And that he was really amused because he could see this guy who was like giving some lady that he knew a hard time or something. I think it was a divorce thing or something. And they were sat around a table signing forms and stuff, and there were no animals or anything in the room. But he said he noticed that the guy just kept sort of like scratching his leg and stuff. And I can't remember full details, but it was like he felt that they were annoying him. Mm-hmm. They pick up on our energy, and they either like us or they don't like us. Mm-hmm. And he also, I think it was him who, when I eventually got not the courage, but I just didn't want to tell him.
You didn't for the longest
but I'd
time.
lost it. I eventually told him, I said, look, I'm sorry, we lost it completely. I don't know why. I did everything I could to try and find it. And straight away he was like, well, maybe we should have, I think, I can't remember his exact words, but maybe we should have asked their permission first, because he actually fully believes there's something around the house. So we were going to redo it, but we've never got around to it yet.
We might do it again someday. But anyway, back on the subject.
Well, there's just so much. I mean, it's like when you get to talk about these things too, I could just tell you two have so many stories and so many experiences.
Right. Yeah.
Would you speak a little? Would you speak a little bit to like in the day to day, like Mark, you mentioned, for example, like, okay, Janice's bad knee and I'm helping with that. But I'm just kind of curious through time in the relationship, how this has continued or shows up. I mean, it may be in the day to day with one another, but you know, even particularly like, I don't know, I'm wondering like if one of you is out at the store and like, oh, I forgot to tell them to get this or something, and like send something. I don't know, that the type of an example comes to mind.
One thing that immediately comes to mind is I'll often be thinking about doing a certain thing, like I don't know, like I haven't done some job around the house or something, or we were going to go and visit whoever, and I'd just be thinking it, and she'll say, so I might be thinking, oh, we should get a hold of John, you know, just making John up, but I mean. And I'd just be thinking it, and she would go, have we contacted John yet? And it's creepy, because it's like, oh my God, she's reading my thoughts. So she does it all the time. And I think it works that way more.
Yeah,
you pick up on it more than I do.
Yeah,
I don't pick up on what she's thinking, really.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. It freaks him out, which I enjoy. But it also maybe negatively, I mean, sometimes I pick up on his moods, and it's really hard when you're that in sync to not be, if he's sad, I get sad, or if he's angry, I'm angry.
Right.
And when we're both happy, it's great. But if one of us is not in the best, you know, emotional state at the moment, it's hard, because I almost have to like go for a walk or something just to kind of reset myself, because I pick up a lot on his emotional state. And usually I'm pretty vocal if I'm unhappy. Mark's he's kind of a more privately grumpy person, but I always pick up on it. So yeah, we that is a challenge. Probably the biggest challenge in our relationship is if he gets upset or I get upset, we just kind of, he probably can comfort me better than I can comfort him, because I tend to just go where he's at just automatically. And probably we need to find a way to not do that. And the only way I've found is, you know, go for a walk, or for me just to go take a bath or do something to really help ground and reset myself. But yeah, it does.
That's really interesting. When you said that, those words struck me. I tend to go where he is, because even from the very beginning, like that's what happened, like with the astral projection and the dream, and like that's so interesting. So you both have sensitivities and gifts, and they're not the exact same gift as one another. So it probably like shows up in its unique expression. And that is one way yours. It's like really being able to maybe effortlessly enter his space or his consciousness.
Yeah, it's not, I don't try. It just happens.
Well, I did wonder, if we go back to those early experiences, like 2016, 17-ish, like where she sort of pictured me at this event. There was one thing I want to say about that is we're split by, I think in our world, in our time, by 6 to 7 hours. I think it varies.
Time frame, yeah, right.
So usually when those things happen, she was asleep, dreaming, right? Whereas I was wide awake doing my thing,
right?
So it happened more because of that at the time.
And maybe it happened more, and I don't remember those incidents either, because I would have been sleeping and might not remember when I woke up.
And they're not always big things like, oh, that was an event. They're insignificant things sometimes, like really insignificant things that are not important. But it just shows the fleeting nature of how she can somehow, her astral body, if you like, can sort of jump in and like piggyback and listen into my thoughts.
Right. Yeah. It's not like watching a movie. It's not that perspective. It's the perspective of being at his side when I had those.
Right.
And there have been more than one. There was one that was really insignificant too.
Yeah,
And
the one in
again,
the kitchen.
yeah, there was one where
And
I
she
had a
actually
dream.
described, we had a big sort of built-in Argo or something like that, oven, huge thing in an old fire chimney breast, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never ever discussed it. She'd never seen a
Right.
picture
No,
of it.
you didn't post
But
anything about yours.
she knew about that,
Yeah.
and she, there was, well, you basically she had this feeling that I
You were
can't
cooking
even
something.
explain it. Yeah,
you were
but
cooking something.
didn't I
and
smell
then,
something?
yeah, you smelled smoke and you thought your son
At
was
the time, I
smoking.
thought he was smoking weed out the back or something.
Then you
And
kind
at
of
the time,
charged out there all
it
angry.
sort of bothered me a little bit, but I sort of gave in the end because we lived in Cornwall, and in Cornwall, it's like everyone does it. It's like Surf City. It's like everyone does that stuff. It's just normal. But it's like at the time, I was like, oh, I got to go out, and I just that fleeting moment of walking through the kitchen to go to the back door to go out and sort of say, "I'll put that out" or whatever it was. And he wasn't out there, and it wasn't weed. It was, I think it was a bonfire or something next door.
Yeah.
And there was that moment of like, oh, that's all right, man.
Yeah.
But she picked up on that, and it's like it's such a weird little tiny thing.
Yeah,
it's not
just
even
like
important.
a little
tiny
blip
glimpse
in time. But I maybe just happened to be. I think I was like taking a nap or something in the middle of the day, and I got really tired, and I had that. It's just like right away, boom.
Yeah.
And then I messaged him about that too, and that was the second time. I'm like, oh, I've gone too far. But and then I knew he was in the weird stuff too. I'm like, well, maybe it never happened before with anyone else that I've ever done that. Not even my children. I get like the sort of insights. If one of them is upset, they get freaked out too, because I'll be texting or call it like, "Are you okay?" And they'll be like, "Oh no, I've got this." And how did you know? And it's like, well, I just kind of had a feeling. Well, it was like that, but more so. I had a glimpse, and my perspective was not watching a video. The perspective would be sort of hovering above his shoulder, kind of like looking down, or by his side, kind of like I am now, but a bit higher. And I don't know what that's about, but that was kind of the perspective that I would be seeing. So again, I don't know. I've never had it, happen before, since, never actively sought to do that. It just sort of spontaneously happened. And I think it just sort of illustrates our connection, that bond. I feel like if we're apart, I do feel like that sort of energy stretch between us. Like they talk about how particles are connected at the subatomic level. And it kind of feels like that, like connected, like a lot of our particles are connected in some way, however that works.
Yeah, when you read the astral projection stuff, like Monroe, I think was the first one.
Robert Monroe.
Yeah. He talked about how when he was trying to teach people how to astrally project at will, and some people claim they can do this. And he said there's like a cord, you can actually literally see this cord. And sometimes, there was sort of, I always remember things like sometimes there'd be these bad energies or whatever, just trying to sever it or jump in back into you and push you out of the way and stuff. So you had to be strong. So this stuff you've got to be really careful with, because
we would not advise it. I mean, it's totally
But mentally strong is important, because you can actually, if you're bothered by, and I have had experiences where, well, we could talk about that. I mean, if it's all about the mental strength. It doesn't matter if you're like, I don't know, if you're a bloke and you're 5'1" and you're a weedy. It doesn't matter. It's how strong your mind is, because the mind is all powerful. So, so I was going to tell that story about how I got annoyed with. So we were temporarily. I'll tell it quickly. We were living in a trailer between properties, because we buy a property, we do it up, and then we sell it and move on and do another one. That's what we're doing now. We're early stages. So we were temporarily in this trailer on her son's acreage, and we knew that, well, this trailer had belonged to an old guy that had died, who wasn't that
Garrett,
old actually,
yeah.
but he was into 50s rock and roll, and I can't remember how I know that. Did you tell me? I can't remember.
Maybe, yeah.
But anyway, basically, I was writing my Cornish, my sort of the Spirit of Cornwall, the Haunted Legacy books, and I was writing them whilst I was in this trailer on my own. While Janice was out at work, I was writing.
I was working full time.
So I'd have this little table, like in a trailer, with a window, and it was really nice. And I was just writing in it. And I love peace and quiet when I'm writing. Just hear the birds, that was it. And as I'm writing, I'm really channeled into this writing. Quite frequently, the radio would suddenly come on full blast in this camper, and it would be just instant. Like, it wasn't like it's turned up, it was just dump, it was on. And it was always 1950s rock and roll, which I don't particularly like, but
it's especially jarring
when
you come in.
It happened a lot, and we sort of made a connection between that and the guy who owned it.
And who had passed away. It was part of his estate sale, was how we got.
And I felt that he was just letting us know that he was around or something, but it used to be crazy because it would give me a real start, really shocking. And on one occasion, I think the last occasion, I was so annoyed, not scared. I mean, it never scares me. It just pisses me off.
Well, it startles.
It startles me. Yeah. So the last time it happened, I really let rip with like foul language, and I'm not going to say what I said, but do one, mate, but stronger. And it's just not a very nice thing to do. And again, it comes back to what I said. It's like, if you're powerful enough in your intention, you can not dominate, but you can put over your
right. And
this is what I want. And most of these, they will respect that because they won't bother you again. I mean, I'm sure there are some that might.
Well, right. Yeah, you don't. There's a fine line. So we've sort of accepted that, the spirits are around us, when we often say, okay, just don't bother us. We won't mention the gentleman, but the house we're in now, someone passed away in this very room. So we kind of have told him early on, well, we hope you like what we're doing. We're trying to save this house. The house is 100 and something. We're not quite sure. It probably 120 years old where we are. Yeah. But yes, that's packing moving blankets behind us because we have to replace the wall.
We had to wait till the spring, which we're there now. We're just about.
So we're going to be starting major construction. So we might see an uptick in activities as well. But we both, again, during our projects, we both have this passion for restoring old properties, and Mark's very meticulous, and both of us have visions. Sometimes we don't always have the same vision, and he needs some convincing. He doesn't like to be led.
I like the sort of European the sort of sparse, Scandinavian sort of very clean cut, very very clean, very no clutter anywhere, just a little bits.
So we differ.
Janice is the opposite. She likes stuff everywhere, and she's constantly just putting things down. And it's like, oh, how did that get there? And it's like, oh, and you can sort of see like a nice, if there's a clean surface with nothing on it, which I like, sort of within. She sees it as an opportunity to put something on it.
It needs some decoration, so we do. But I think again, and we've had challenges in working through our separate preferences, but I think they do complement each other, because I think a home that doesn't have plants and doesn't have some pretty soft things just seems too utilitarian and cold to me. And I think we do have a nice balance, because given my preferences, I would have clutter everywhere, wouldn't be able to find anything. So we do have that kind of demonstrates our relationship, where both of us have strengths and both of us can kind of learn to compromise
as well. I think
compromise is a challenge, because we both are stubborn that way. But
well, it's something that not everyone has in their relationship, the ability to be oneself and to allow the other to be themselves. And then through that, there is that compromise, but finding, more of a balance or kind of are better than you could do on your own. So I really, I think think that really shines through in all your stories that you shared today. Is there anything that any final words you'd like to leave with viewers, or just any final thoughts?
I think sometimes just accept things, because neither of us at the time were looking for a relationship. And it was sort of a leap of fate. And I guess maybe I wouldn't suggest everyone take that leap of fate, but it seemed like when I had the astral travel incidences, it seemed like my soul took that leap of fate without my body. I mean, it was just there. It was, that connection was so powerful, it just couldn't be ignored. And I wouldn't suggest everyone disrupt their lives, but in taking that leap of faith, I mean, both of us have grown exponentially. And like you said, I feel like we're both better, stronger persons individually and, together, because we did take that chance and have that faith in Mark. And I have ultimate, like I said earlier, he is my safe space where we can really talk about anything together and know it's going to be okay.
Yeah, beautiful. Mark, any final words?
I would have said much the same, really. Just, I suppose, be open to opportunities, and don't sort of close the door and stuff, and don't be scared of any creepy stuff that might happen, because it's not creepy. It's just stuff we don't understand yet.
Right.
So
That's right. That's right. And when we find ourselves in a place we don't understand, we can sometimes defend against that rather than staying open and curious and skeptical, maybe, but still open to experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were hundreds of things experiences and stuff we could tell you about, but it's ongoing. I mean, but it's just life to us. It's and we're quite lucky. And actually, I think you can see this T-shirt. This is this is the local. Well, they actually sort of closed it down now, unfortunately. But it was Prairie Land? Yeah,
Paranormal.
but Prairie Land Paranormal, or Paranormal Prairie Land Consortium.
Yeah. See,
yeah,
again,
we say
different
pronunciations.
pronunciations. We do this all the time.
And basically, it was one of the first when I first came here. I got invited to this sort of monthly meetup in the local university or tech, whatever it is, and met an amazing bunch of people who sort of had similar experiences over their lifetime, and some fantastic guys, including Jeff, the professor we were talking about earlier, and a guy called Carl Jones who ran it. Fantastic. And we got together there, and that was another place we could go and talk about this stuff. And it was so enjoyable. And I gave a few talks there as well, but I was there to listen to other people, really.
But it was initially, both of us had all these experiences and gathered groups of people around us and become part of these groups separately. And when we came together, it was kind of like, let me introduce you to my people. And he was like, come meet my friends. And it was so enriching for both of us to be able to expand almost exponentially that way through each other's contacts.
We actually met
so many opportunities that we would never have had before. And both of us feel that way. So we just feel kind of so lucky and so blessed and so thankful that we followed that initial nudge. I think
I just had a thought, actually. A lot of this, what this is about, being open, and that it's like doors open for you in your life, right? And you can either go through them or stay where you are, and whichever you want to do. But doors open for us, and it's like all of mine. You could if you could trace it back to where that door opened, I think it was probably my decision to write that book, which I would probably do it a little bit differently now, but it was called Wyatt's Weird World, and basically it wasn't intended to be published. The idea was I would just write all this stuff down, because most of the people around me weren't interested in that stuff really at all, And I just wanted to write it all down, so it may be great grandkids or something who might have a similar feeling, might pick it up one day and go, "Oh, this is interesting. This bloke was crazy. Listen to this," And so that was it initially. But then somebody read bits of it. I can't remember who that was now. My mind's gone. And said, "Oh, you should publish it." And then that was the spark, and it was by doing that I ended up on Jim Howard's podcast, and it's by doing that Janice heard. So again, that door opened all these opportunities, and also like in England when she came over, she got to meet an author called Michael Williams, a fantastic guy.
Right.
He's sadly now passed, but he's such a nice guy, and he'd been writing since I was a kid. So I think he was approaching 90 or something when he passed. But I'd read his books when I was a kid, and they weren't like big books. They were just like quite slim volumes on different paranormal bits and pieces. But he also did arts and culture and stuff. And he was a sort of journalist on a local quality newspaper back in the day. And through him, I've also got into all that. And I've met people back home in Cornwall, all the art scene there. I sort of know a lot of these people now. And that all comes from, and they're like personal friends, and it all comes from that, like connections and following, opening the door. Oh, that looks interesting. I'll go through that one. And that will lead to more.
Or kind of like a path, if you think of a journey where you could go this way or you could go that way. And, you might choose the more murky path, and then it just leads to so many other things.
Yeah.
If you don't
right
when you initially start out on that journey, you have no idea.
And also it sort of cycles back in some ways. One tiny thing, I'll just leave with some weird thing is, I went to go and interview this author who had been like a childhood hero sort of thing, and he was getting older. And I found out that he lived fairly close to me at the time, like up on these moors. And I thought, oh, he's not that far. He's like 20 miles away. And I sort of gathered up the courage and I contacted him. So this was about, I think, 2016 probably. And I thought I'd like to just go meet him and have a chat with him and record him. And first time I'd ever done that. And I didn't have a clue. I just didn't have a clue, and my recording quality was rubbish, really. And I just went over there. He invited me over, and then I cut a long story short, but I got on really well with him. He was very accommodating and understanding to this sort of guy who was a lot younger as I was, than him. And he was helping me out with the recording, like, in sort of really funny ways. I've still got it, and I've enhanced it since. So I've actually got a quality recording of it now. But one of the things he then, about a week passed by, and he sent me a letter, or his secretary sent me a letter, and basically said, "We would like you to become a member of our local paranormal group." And it was like by invitation only. It wasn't one of these where anybody can join. It was like you had to be invited. And he invited us out to dinner with all of these people. And Janice came along on one of them later.
Mm-hmm.
But he used to like putting people on different tables to mix people up so they could meet new people. And he would write out little labels, like place cards. He was like an old-fashioned English gentleman, like a real one, he always had a tie on and all this, he's old school. And I was put in one of these places, one of these sort of restaurants. I was put next door to these two sort of older ladies, and one of them was the secretary for Colin Wilson that we spoke about earlier. So that's sort of full circle, because it was his books I was reading when I was a young teenager that got me sort of along the path a bit more. And then I ended up like 30 years later or whatever it was, meeting his secretary.
But you should also mention what your place card said,
because
I think that struck you.
Yeah, that was, I'm trying to, how should I explain that? So I'd gone along to him, interviewed him, and then I'd got the books published, and they were based on the place where we both lived, which is a unique region of Britain called Cornwall. And How did he do it? I can't remember now. I
On
think he
your
read
place
it. He read
card.
it. Yeah, but how did that come about? I can't
Well,
remember
he
now.
knew that you were an author, so on
But I
your
was like a
place card,
fledgling author, really.
right? Well, you were an
I'm
author,
better now.
but I think that
But
just brought home because on your place card, I
yeah,
remember you
he
saying
always used to put what you did, so people would
right.
know, like, oh, who am I next door to? You know, and up to that point, and he was a good writer, a really good writer, and he, as I say, was into the arts and everything. He was very, very educated, and he basically had put Mark Anthony Wyatt, and underneath, and he'd done it in like this beautiful calligraphy, or his secretary had, and it said writer. I thought, oh, thank you. And it was like that sort of, I kept it because I thought that is amazing. Because like coming from him, it's like I was just self-publishing.
It carried a lot of weight.
Yeah, it meant something. I thought, oh, actually, maybe I am.
Yeah, I identify as a writer now.
Yeah,
author, published author.
Yeah, so.
Yep,
Right.
And that's one thing I always try to honor that about Mark, because he does have a way with words. He's very talented. So anyway, try to support him.
Thank you. You shouldn't.
No.
Well, it's been so fun talking with you, hearing your stories. I can tell we could go on and on and on. There are so many stories, so many experiences. There's just, well, we've explored all sorts of, and from different parts of your lives too. I mean, this isn't just new or sudden. Like these are experiences and parts of your life. Exactly. So I thank you so much for spending this time with me and sharing your story. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking. Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Mark and Janice for spending this time with me, sharing their stories. Wonderful people, fascinating stories, fascinating experiences they've had, both in their relationship with one another and individually in their lives as well. I hope this got your mind stirring, your wheels going, and maybe some of you have had paranormal experiences or encounters that you may want to add. Feel free to leave those in the comments section. I think it's so interesting, and not everyone is open to these types of experiences. So when you find people that you can talk with or share the stories and they say, yeah, I believe you. There's nothing crazy or wrong with you. You know, all of this helps to really feel validation and go deeper into the mysteries and the meaning of some of these supernatural or paranormal experiences, consciousness defying ways that people connect, come together. Janice mentioned astral projection, astral travel, a lot of these things happening in dream states. So very, very, very interesting stuff. I also thought for those romantics out there listening to the podcast, just by being able to hear another couple's experiences of not just, oh, we're soulmates, but also, wow, look what's happened through and as a result of our connection with one another. Some of these are romantic in the purest possible sense, you know, really two people coming together and setting off a number of transpersonal or mysterious ways that they have connections with one another. So all of it was very, very interesting to me, and I hope you enjoyed just as much as I did. All right, I'll see you next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you're interested in learning about ways to work with me, head over to my website, themoderndayromantic.com. From there, you'll be able to contact me and learn a bit more about the customized intensives and retreats I offer both individuals and couples. Thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you next episode.